Hey everyone, welcome to Friday. Park Howell here with the Business of Story Facebook Live show today. And we are so lucky because we have a guest who is a client of ours and is now bunking in across the street from ours with a brand new category defining concept that you're going to love to hear about. And all this time, for the last several months, I've been telling you about the story cycle process, taking you through theory of it. Well, today you're going to get to meet a gentleman who has gone through it. We worked with him and his family through the story cycle to help them develop this overall new brand category, naming of the organization, and where they're going with it. So it's really going to be great to have Ross Weissman with us here in just a minute. Before we go there, though, I want to remind you about storytelling for leaders. Now, I've been spending this week, it's been a blast. I've been working with Mark Shank out of Melbourne. We've been on Skype, and he's been doing some work coaching with me, and we're bringing his program all together, and we'll be here a week from today at Park & Co. for the Storytelling for Leaders 6-month deliberate training program. So we are going to be starting with the one-day immersive, intimate workshop here in our office. We have 4 seats left, just 4 seats remain, where you will spend the day with us a week from today from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We're going to take you through the program. You're going to learn the 4 primary shapes of stories, including the connecting story, the clarity story, the influence story, and the success story, and you'll be able to put these to use for you immediately following the workshop. But then, of course, we'll be working with you for the next 6 months. Every week, you'll be getting a story assignment that you will use within your organization, grabbing that content, creating those stories to start developing a storytelling culture in your group, in your brand, in your company, and then being able to use those stories for content for your inbound marketing, outbound marketing, literally creating that culture that drives epic performance. And of course, this program has been around for 13 years. Anecdote, Sean Callahan, Mark Shank, they have been teaching this around the world. And as you know, I spent the time and energy and money to get certified as a coach for it this year. It's the perfect execution or extension of what I'm doing in brand storytelling with Business of Story. So if you have interest of joining us, let me just copy this link and put it up here in the comments so you've got a place to go to learn more about it. And again, we only have 4 seats left for this live program kicking off Friday, a week from today, for our 6-month deliberate practice program. All right. Also wants to remind you that this week we've had on the Business of Story podcast, Kimberly Mano-Riot, and she came to us from Madrid, Spain, actually worked for a company called Context Partners out of Portland, Oregon. And why this show was so interesting this week is they talk about movement making. Whenever we create a campaign, we're always really trying to create a movement. It's not just enough to sell our products and services. We're trying to build community around those brands, our brand products and services, and then get those people to take on our story and literally create a movement out of what we're doing. And you're going to hear more about that today with Ross too. But this week's episode is great with Kimberly because they are experts in movement making. And what they have done in all their years of doing this around the world have identified the 6 primary roles of people that you need to be looking out for and to invite them into your campaign, your brand, your movement. 6 primary roles that they play to make sure that your movement is successful. And how you first identify who those people are and what role they play. And then how do you tell your story from their point of view, again, depending on the role they play, to get them into your initiative, your movement, your campaign, in the doors of your brand. So if you want to learn more about that, certainly listen to this week's episode with Kimberly Mano-Riot of Context Partners on Business of Story podcast. Now, let's dive right into this and introduce, he's standing right by me here, Ross Weissman. Come on in, Ross.
Hey, Park.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see
and
you
here
too.
he is, Current Meditation. Current it's really been kind of a fascinating thing. Oh, never mind.
Technical difficulty.
Technical difficulties. We've been working with you guys for what, 2.5 years maybe in developing
about
this?
2 years.
About 2 years.
Yeah.
And they've got this whole new concept. I'm going to let Ross tell you more about it. But where they created their flagship studios, and you guys were looking all over the place to put this thing. Turns out this development literally right across the street from Park & Co. on 44th and Indian School Road. Brand new place, perfect little strip center shopping area. I don't know what they call it.
It's kind of a mix of restaurants and lifestyle businesses, personal care, health and wellness. Yeah. And it ended up being the perfect spot for us.
Yeah. So we get acquainted. We go through the story cycle process, understand their story, help pull their whole brand story together, only to have them literally land and launch directly across the street. So that was pretty convenient.
Yeah, it was pretty serendipitous. And so what we're doing over there, Current Meditation, is our approach to the practice of meditation itself. And we've put together a studio where we offer classes that are guided group meditation classes. And each of those classes is comprised of a few different components. We've got breathing techniques, harmonic sound. We have signature aerial hammocks that we use. And all of this is based on scientifically backed benefits of meditation. And we've designed the classes that way. So each class you take, you're getting the benefits of these different tools and techniques to help you build focus, awareness, and resilience to stress.
And essentially, you guys have, and there are a few other meditation studios out there, but not very many around the country. They're just, sort of cherry-picked in some of the bigger markets. But you guys have really set out to define an entire new category. Yeah. Tell us about that.
It's interesting. We've actually, we have a lot of perspective from looking at these other studios of what they're doing, and have found that a lot of what they're doing is, even though it looks a bit different in the packaging, it's just taking the same approach to the curriculums and the classes that they've done in the past in other meditation settings, and just kind of putting it into a new setting and a spot that looks different. But the way that the content's presented is not this new contemporary way. And we're trying to take a more modern approach to our technique and how we've actually put the classes together, so that it's kind of deconstructing the way meditation's been presented in the past, and presenting the parts and pieces of it that we feel are more modern, in a sense that people will feel is approachable, and easy for them to take up the practice.
Yeah. So have you guys always been in meditation, or what is your backstory and the families that came together to even think that this was plausible, let alone really, being all in about identifying and introducing a brand new market category to folks? So what's the background?
Yeah, well, there's a few elements to it. Our background as a family is that we are involved in personal care businesses and health and wellness businesses. So European Wax Center and Massage Envy. Both of those businesses have seen great success.
How many Massage Envies do you have?
We own 2 Massage Envies. We also are overseeing regions. So there's about 85 locations within the regions we oversee.
Okay.
We help them get open. We train them. We do the ongoing coaching with them. We help them find locations. Yeah. So kind of soup to nuts.
And how long has your family been in the Massage Envy, European Wax?
That's been over 10 years, so about 12 years actually.
And what is it? What is that category called?
Well, I'd say like the health and wellness category. That's self, care and all of that. They seem to intersect now. But the Massage Envy is definitely more health and wellness. The European Wax Center is more personal care.
Okay, so let's set the stage for our folks here. When you guys came to us a year and a half or so ago with this new concept, and I know you had talked to a couple of other agencies, and we were fortunate enough to have you come to Park & Co. to work through our story process. Now, it's your father and uncle, so you have the 2 Weissman families that are a part of this, and the Brovitz family.
Yes.
And you all have been working side by side or knew each other in these other endeavors. You guys came together to create this program.
Right.
What was it about the story cycle process that intrigued you, that you thought it was right for helping you and those families understand the story that you're trying to create in this new category?
I think a few things. We recognized that we kind of had our own story that was budding at the time, and we were trying to make sense of that. And we also knew that there's a lot of different ways that people are, as we learned about this practice of meditation and mindfulness, there are a lot of different ways that people benefit from it a whole slew of stories and different kinds of story arcs that are happening just in people's personal lives. And so it just struck a chord immediately to see this concept of the hero's journey and the story cycle and what we were about to embark on ourselves, and just seemed to be a perfect fit for us for this brand building experience.
And it's been interesting for me too, because I always talk about story being a fractal, that it happens in very small ways. You know, every day you're experiencing this sort of hero's journey story in your own way, but it also happens in very epic ways. So when we start working with a brand like Current, and by the way, when they came to us, it was just a concept. You guys were working with Fitch, a really amazing architectural firm, to start kind of designing what the inside of this studio would look like. But there was no name, there was no overall brand. And yet, you know, we were looking to create this large epic brand story that was supported by the family story, which would ultimately be supported by how people would experience this brand when they would go from their ordinary world of mayhem in their offices and their cars and pull in and step into this extraordinary world of Current meditation, even for 20 minutes or 40 minutes, that they would be within the studio, and then they would leave, as Joseph Campbell would say, with the boon, this mental fitness that we talked about. That's really the category we're looking at, is CrossFit for your brain, this mental fitness category through meditation and making it accessible. So that's what was so interesting. Now, one of the first steps we did with you all is literally the backstory, chapter 1 of the story cycle process, and that is about understanding your number one position in the marketplace. What do you do better than anybody else? How did that help you guys define, and what is your number one position in the marketplace?
Yeah, that really did help us. And it's actually, there's somewhat of an evolutionary nature to it, but starting out, everything that went into that story process for us was our experiences in these other businesses and what we believed would be the way to approach this new category. And that's the best we could do, because we didn't have the studio at the time, and we had to imbue this process with what we knew at the time.
Yep.
And so it helped us, because it helped us to define, if this is our story and this is what the number one thing that we're going to be good at, here's the things then we should not do. Here's what we should leave out, and here's what we should make a part of that narrative and that story that we think would support that narrative. And so, you know, really it's become that we're all about bringing people mental fitness and well-being in their lives, and being the best at doing that, creating communities of people that are meditating.
And being very accessible to people.
Very accessible.
So it's like on the street corner. You can do this at home. And I would imagine, you know, well, I know you've gotten some pushback, like, why would I pay to be a member there and come in and do it when I can just do this for free at home?
Right.
But this all plays to your position too. So what is the answer to that? Or what are you seeing play out now that you've been open for 6 months?
Right. Now that we've been open, we're seeing the patterns are very similar. It's all human behavior that, just like physical fitness, you see people have a tough time getting into a routine and building that routine. So our role in this story, being the mentor, you know, as the company that helps guide them through this, is keeping people on track and giving them place where they feel comfortable building this meditation routine for themselves personally, but doing it in the context of a community of people that are also interested. And that helps them in turn keep their practice going.
Yeah. So really, it boils down to bringing modern meditation in that is accessible to people, and it's getting them to the point of this is just as natural as walking into a massage envy to get a massage.
Exactly.
And some of the other healthcare things, but this, or going to your CrossFit class, your yoga class, or whatever. But that's all you do. I mean, the thing about Current meditation that struck me too, that we want to be crystal clear on that number one position, is they're not a yoga class. They're not a CrossFit class. In fact, you're not going to go for any cardio. You are going to go for pure mental fitness. And I thought that was important too, to keep you, and it was you guys doing this. It wasn't our prodding, but you guys are really smart to say, no, we are got to be super focused one thing and one thing only, and that's meditation.
Right. And that's what we've seen work with something like a Massage Envy or a European Wax Center. You focus on one thing, you're an expert at that one thing. And then you can design an experience that's very specific around making sure that people actually are doing that one thing
instead
of presenting a whole bunch of different options and hoping that they choose the right path.
Yeah.
So
I think it was your mom telling me I ran into her after the fact, and the studio was up and running and we were doing some work over there. And she was having so much fun because having gone through the whole story cycle system, she learned a lot more about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And she was at some cocktail party and somebody brought Joseph Campbell up and she was like the only one there that could actually comment on it. And I remember how excited she was about that.
Yeah.
That was like little added value in the process.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So like stage 2 then, and we're not going to go through all 10 today because we don't have time, but let's just hit on the really important ones. Or not, they're all important, but the high level ones. Stage 2 is understanding who your hero is. And as we always have to explain to all brands, and I think they get it because of their work through Massage Envy and whatnot, is the brand is not the hero. It's your customers and what journeys they are on. So because this brand started from scratch and you are literally defining this brand new category, we have to work in fiction. I mean, these are aspirational stories that we're creating and telling ourselves to allow us to operationally live into it, but it changes. And Ross knows even in the 6 months, you guys are constantly course correcting and trying different things. Now, who were your top 3 audiences, if you recall, or even the first top 2, and how have they changed in just the 6 months you've been open, if they have changed? What have you experienced?
Yeah, well, we kind of expected, and it's become true that the main audience that we're getting immediately is the health and wellness minded person. And, for better or for worse, that often ends up being women first. They're more enlightened about this stuff anyway, integrative wellness.
Now you got to be careful for better or worse when you say that about women. So I would.
Well, I only say that from the perspective of we want everyone to come through the front door of this business.
The men got to wake up is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the reality is that they're coming through the front door first, which is great. They help us to work through and set this trend of how to take care of yourself and use integrative wellness in a smart way, that it's not just a physical practice of taking care of yourself, but also a mental practice. So that health and wellness minded person, and we had talked early on about aspirationals, right? People who purchase with purpose. And I think we're seeing a lot of those people come through the door. It's been, in the beginning, it's been older generations that are actually coming through the door, which is kind of surprising. We thought we would get younger people sooner and faster. But now it's becoming more of a mix, and we're seeing that it's both older and younger coming through. But the people that are coming through are, people who have stressful jobs. I mean, that is like a number one. We have one of our favorite people that comes in actually works in the airline industry and handles all of the upset customers. It's like the classic
not for United Airlines.
No, not United. But
they could send in their entire
that person's
leadership.
Hiding right now.
Yeah.
But we have people that come in from hospital jobs, pharmacists and nurses and doctors. So that group that you would expect to have a tough job, they come in. We also have just stay-at-home moms who have errands to run and they have busy days and they want to get that break in the middle of the day. So we have this different group that's coming in. And then you've got people that you can just tell are part of that group of, I want to take care of myself and, stay physically fit, but also they want to stay mentally fit. And it's really that aspirationals group, like that, those people that just kind of get it and they want to stay healthy.
And they're learning. So they're coming in and they're checking it out. And I imagine you got some newbies in there too, like, what the hell is this? And then once they experience it, they're like, hey, this is pretty cool. Not something I was expecting.
Right.
And I think that plays then to, the next step in the process is really understanding how do you level up that number one position, the marketplace statement, into something a little bit more human. So what is that unique value proposition that Current offers? And it's what they need to live into day in and day out to make this new market segment really happen.
Right. It just boils down to that Current strengthens your mental fitness and your well-being. And everything we do is driving towards that effort.
And why did you play off of this idea of how can we sort of transfer what everybody already knows about physical fitness through yoga and CrossFit and that sort of thing and connect it to the meditation world so it doesn't quite seem so woo-woo out there that, look, you're already doing this for your body, why not do this for your brain?
Right. Well, it's based on, there's a lot of scientific evidence that before was not measurable and now is, that is proving this to be the case, that this is truly a benefit to you, both, cognitively and physiologically. And there's, positive psychology has come such a long way since it first became popular in like 1998, when they were just becoming, a thing in positive psychology. Now you read all sorts of books and things that are talking about that concept. And if you look at the way physical fitness came to be, you look at the 50s and 60s as, Jack LaLanne and all these personal fitness people started to become popular and popularized the idea of physically taking care of yourself, because everyone suddenly found themselves working in an office job, under fluorescent lighting in an office building, and no longer, in a factory or in a field, or all these physical jobs that went away and slowly dissolved from that turn of the century. And so there was a long but very meaningful ramp of people understanding, okay, I have to physically take care of myself now. And that happened over the course of 50 years. And it's still happening. They're still learning about, okay, well, that 80s aerobics exercise was ridiculous. No one does that really anymore. This is, high intensity interval training is the way to get the most out of your workout.
Yeah.
And so we see a very similar trend as it relates to mental fitness, as there's more science and there's more research that's coming out about how to take care of your mind. It's all becoming, parts and pieces are coming together to explain how does positive psychology fit into that? How does the concept of, meditation, what's relaxation versus meditation? All of these things that actually do have a physiological effect on your body. It's such a similar conceptual breakdown of the parts and pieces, the techniques, the tools you're using, that create this entire world of mental fitness. It's all based on the same kind of concepts of the human body and how everything works together.
Well, and it's that natural evolution, like you said, going from a bunch of farm workers and factory workers now to more sedentary jobs, so people have to take care of their bodies to keep them going. Well, in this day and age, since the interweb showed up and we are completely bombarded with content and that cacophony of communication day in and day out, doing way more with way less, our attention spans are disappearing. We'll have a gentleman on our podcast in a couple of weeks named Jordan Bauer, who tells the story of hiking between Seattle and Mexico City, or Mexico on the Pacific coast, and that he ran into thousands of people and sat and chatted with them from all walks of life. And I asked him what the one theme was, and he said loneliness and alienation. That people, even though we're uber connected through our devices, we are literally uber disconnected with stuff like this, one-on-one. So it's really like ideal timing for meditation and mental fitness. It's not enough to keep our bodies active and strength. We have to figure out how we can sort of take back control of our minds. And the one other thing I'll say on this is a famous psychologist, and I can't think of his name right now, said, our brains are not logic processors, we're story processors. So we are bombarded with logic and this sort of thing and data online, but it's the stories we tell ourselves and live into is where truly our mental fitness comes from. So you guys are kind of like that rest area that I can pull in and just go, oh my God. And you're even breaking up some of your practices. Like morning is to jumpstart your day. Noon is to pause, take a deep breath, get your act together. And then the evening is to wind down, calm down. So,
that's something that we found was needed. We started our curriculum very differently when we opened 6 months ago, and it was a little more scattered. People didn't know what class to take. They didn't really know how to start. There was too much variety, and it was paralyzing for some to just even understand how to get into the practice of meditation. And so we've now come to this different place of understanding that people are just looking, how do I incorporate this into my day-to-day, my routine, which happens to be the single greatest factor in how effective your practice is going to be, is how consistent you are with it. So everything we do, we want it to be based on you consistently finding that time that works for you. So if it's in the morning and you want to energize before work and you want to prepare your mind for your day so you're sharp and you're building your creative skill, you do that. You come in and you get that more energizing approach to the meditation practice, and we tweak the things about the class and the surrounding experience to support that.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Well, what's so interesting for me to see Ross and his team and Melanie and the rest of the team that are making this happen over there is, as we were developing their brand story using the story cycle, a lot of the research went into it and a lot of experimentation went in and a lot of visits to other studios to learn what this was about. But essentially, as I mentioned earlier, we were writing fiction at the time because we didn't know how it's going to play out. So the brand story, especially when you're starting without a name, without that philosophy, well, the philosophy was intact. It was just a matter of focusing it, but finding the character of the brand,
right,
so that they could live into and prosper from it. Now, the prospering may come even a little bit more down the road because you guys are now proofing the fictional story and creating a nonfiction, authentic story as you are learning and pivoting as you go. What story elements work, what story elements didn't work, but it started with focusing on a story.
Right. And I think what's happening now, this is an interesting thing. We haven't even gotten to talk about this yet, but my feeling is that our customer is the hero, right, in our story and our journey.
The center of the story. Yeah.
But at the same time, they're becoming our mentor in a sense.
Yeah.
And there's kind of this feedback loop that's happening, which is a natural feedback loop. But there is an important role that they're going to play in us refining our brand story, and those nuggets of gold that they can give us of feedback will actually help us to refine what we're doing, and the story will evolve because of that.
Yeah, well, it's so much fun to be literally across the street and watch this thing now start playing out, really understanding everything from a brand new startup mentality and how you've got to pivot and how you have to let go of some old ways of thinking and be open to some new ways of thinking. But it all started from a starting point of a focused brand story. And one of the things that's really important that is when we get into chapter 6, enter the mentor. This is where it's literally all about the brand. And Ross just mentioned it. The brand is not the center of the story. The brand is not the hero of the journey. Your customers are. And they understood this explicitly. But in chapter 6, we look about the brand. What are the 3 primary things we want to do with the brand in this area? That is, arrive at what the emotional promise is that you get from interacting with current meditation. And that's a promise from investors, staff, leadership, and to your customers so that everybody leaves there with that one emotional promise.
Right.
Recall what it is?
Awareness, transformation, and intent, which leads to freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that because you think about it. If we can boil that down to this one focused word, the promise is freedom. So if you come to work for Current, we are going to let you be free to experiencing your own career in your way through the vehicle of Current Meditation. As you look at the customers, it's how do you regain mental fitness so that you have the freedom to take on life the way you want to in your own authentic way, be able to push aside the fears and the craziness that goes on and have more strength. And then as you grow this concept, the whole idea here is a flagship store or studio, a couple more here in Phoenix, and then taking this nationally. And I know you said you already have immense interest in people buying in, but you want to dial it in, to make sure that the story and the operations and the delivery is just perfect. But think about that freedom word as it relates to your franchisees as well, because they are looking for freedom in their own life. And in essence, they can use Current in a lot of different ways to experience that freedom, providing freedom to their staff, to their customers, but also freedom as an entrepreneur in their own life to run a very successful thing. So freedom is hugely important to find that emotional promise in your brand story that everyone can really work towards.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that, it just so happens that franchisees, and they've done a lot of studies and surveys on this, but it doesn't matter how much wealth you have. Pretty much every franchisee across the board is looking for financial freedom and for that financial return. So it does fit well. I mean, it is an avenue for them to strike out on their own and become, their own entity and be able to cultivate that freedom for themselves.
Yeah. And then what we do as we're building now out and really thinking about what the brand delivers as the mentor guidance journey is we've got freedom down as the emotional promise and then the gift. And the reason why this is important is I always underscore it's not what you make, but what you make happen in people's lives. what gift do they receive by buying into your product or service? So what you guys make is meditation, modern meditation techniques, totally accessible to people in a really cool environment with terrific mindfulness coaches, and all of the inner workings and your little community table there that people can gather around, and you make all of that stuff. Cool logo, cool stuff to go with it. But what do you make happen? What's the gift that Current focuses on in their brand story?
Well, the greatest gift that we could give someone, which is just them being, rather than doing and doing and doing, them being comfortable with just being. So
and being who they are,
yeah.
Being in the moment, not worrying about the fear of missing out, FOMO. Just be right now. Not worrying about that tax bill tomorrow. Just be in the moment. Not worrying about that big promotion that's right around the corner. Just being in the moment now.
That's right, because all of life happens in the present moment. It does not happen in the past or the future. That is just a figment of your imagination. So that's the important thing. The important takeaway from this session would be live in the present moment.
Well, and we are taught to live in the future. We're taught to consume. We're taught to make money right now, save it so you can consume and buy and live in the future. So I know I suffer from that a lot. I'm living in the future all the time. I have the hardest time of just being now, because it's like, okay, I got to get this done. I got to set that up, and I got to make sure we do that so that we got this down here. And that, I know we all sort of suffer from that, but yours is a place of a respite to get away from that.
Right.
And the one thing I have learned with practice around meditation is you do get better at swatting flies, as I call them. And flies are these fearful thoughts that come into your brain, and I get them all the time. We all do. But now I'm better at swatting them. Like I can, like it, boom, oh, I see it coming, boom, gone. There is a strength in that, that you don't think you would get by just sitting there and meditating.
Right.
But it really gives you control of your brain in a lot of different ways.
Absolutely. It's all about finding a greater amount of space for you to respond to something between the stimulus and then the response itself.
Yeah.
And so that space that you create for yourself by having that control and that understanding of your thoughts and you being aware of them and knowing that you are not actually your thoughts, the very fact that you can observe them means that you are not them. Yeah. And so that's the key concept there.
I think, therefore I am. I mean, it goes way back to a lot of people say that was all, that was almost the downfall of humanity, when we could step back and start looking around and going, oh, wait a minute. I mean, I could die, or, oh, what am I thinking here? Oh, this is crazy. Nobody else can do that. Right. So it helps us to get to where we are today in this technologically driven world and all the wonderful advancements. But it's also kind of crazy because it's got a shadow side to it too.
Right.
Because we freak out a lot. It just comes down to it. We all do.
Yeah. And if you really want to get technical about it, I think therefore I am is actually the wrong way to say it. If we are not actually our thoughts, and that's saying, I'm a being because I am thinking. Yeah. And there's a lot of conjecture about whether or not should those be divorced, those two concepts. And that's really what the meditation is about, is that awareness, kind of just understanding the different processes that are going on and being able to interpret them and just understand them better. So
it's just a fascinating world. And I was doing some meditation before we started working together. And I was like a lot of people, I suppose, on and off. Try it for a while, and I kind of get a groove going, and then a few weeks would go by, I'd get busy. And so now that I'm back in and I'm doing it more, I can tell a big difference. And it's not woo. I know a lot of people think, that's some sort of mysticism, BS. But there's a great book, a book I just absolutely happened upon called Trying Not to Try. And I'm not sure I'll get the author's name quite right, Slingerland. He is a professor at British Columbia University. Did a wonderful job where he is exploring meditation and the approaches from Hinduism and Taoism. Anyways, the arts, the Eastern arts, but then overlaid on MRIs and what's it's telling our brain. So it's this intersection of science and meditation and mindfulness. It's not just meditation, but it's mindfulness, being in the moment. Right. And it's a really fun book to read. He's a great writer. It's tremendous storytelling, very accessible. But if you're interested in something like that, I highly recommend Trying Not to Try. Great book. Now, one of the next steps when we're doing this, so we got your emotional promise down of freedom. That gift when you come in is just to be, just the place that you can be. If Starbucks is your third place, home, work, and Starbucks, this is almost your fourth place where you can go in and escape and just be. What is the character and the personality that we arrived at with you and your families to create this? And what we're talking about here is the brand archetype, the personality that then gets reflected in all you do.
Yeah, the primary one is the explorer. And we love that, just because from so many different approaches, there's a tie-in with that archetype. We're exploring a new industry, a new market category entirely. Each of the people that come through our front door, our customers, are exploring their own mind essentially to understand, themselves better. And so there's just such a cool tie-in with that across the board.
And it's been fun working on that. And I just, by the way, put up the Current website at becurrent.com if you want to go and check out how their personality and it has come to being, and it's playful too. So it's exploratory. It's that explorer archetype, but we also had some, other archetypes that influenced it too. Yeah. And we wanted to bring the creativity and the fun through to make it more accessible, because that was one of your big goals with your storytelling, is we want to make meditation accessible to people.
Yeah, and the other two are the sage and the magician, which I love those as well. And I love that we could have kind of those sub archetypes in there, because we want to educate people. We want to be informative about the practice, so that fits beautifully with the sage.
Right.
And then we also are presenting an experience that is unexpected. It's not like something you've seen before. And so when you come in, there's a little bit of that magic element to what we're doing, and we want to keep that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just came down to, as we were working through the whole process of Story Cycle System, is just exploring a lot of these different avenues and channels and personalities, which then ultimately we arrived at the name Current Meditation. And we went through and looked at hundreds and hundreds of names, boiled them down to 3 or 4 that we presented you and your team. And what was it about Current that you felt just really struck and resonated with everybody at the table?
Gosh, I over time, like, that name has really become more and more of a love affair for us, because there's so much to it. It's a very simple name on its surface, and yet there's a lot of deep meaning to it and a lot of things that it can mean. And so what it's come to mean for us is, current is the present moment. It's right now. Current is also, interesting. It's popular. It's not something from the past. It's always going to be, something that is for the now, not a forgotten concept or idea that's become stale. And it also is this flow. It's a flow of energy. It's the flow of your thoughts. It's the flow of, it could be water, electricity, wind. It's just a natural way of things. And so we are trying to use a natural process, your mind, to kind of unlock the power of that scientifically backed benefits that you can get through going through a very simple practice. And so it's become kind of the flag of the brand, which is great, that it could mean so many things and yet be so simple. And it also doesn't pigeonhole us. Like, there's a few other studios out there that have named themselves in ways that are just very specific. And so they'll never, it'll be like KFC. Eventually they're going to want to try and hide the fact that it's fried chicken because, no one wants to eat unhealthy anymore. And so I think this name it's going to have great legs to it.
So your KFC is going to go to Kentucky French Chicken,
right?
Probably.
That F can mean anything.
Well, I know. And as we looked through it, Current was definitely our favorite when we landed on it. We had some that were kind of outside the box and that were a lot of fun too.
Yeah.
But to your point, Current makes you think in an interesting way of the different parallels like that you talked about. Now, finally, as we're going through this with the Weissman family, the Robitzes, you all had a lot of different thoughts about how this was all going to come to be. How do you think the Story Cycle System helped you build consensus around this brand? Because, not only are you surrounded by a lot of smart leaders and smart business leaders. Now amp that up by 10. They're family members. So, there's this that happens with families too. How did this system help you guys, the process help you guys build consensus around what this brand stands for?
I think just the fact that it was a process rather than a random, cobbling together of ideas, that in itself gives confidence that if you go through this and you put the thought into it, it'll, everyone's ideas can be represented and weaved into the narrative in one way, shape, or form. But in addition to that, the fact that, it is a narrative, a story. People can get behind a story more easily than they can just a slew of ideas on a sheet of paper. And so if we can talk about this as an actual story, that makes all the difference.
Yeah. Finally, then, the brand purpose. It comes down to what is it? How did we put the bow on it? What current exists beyond making money? Current exists to help people do what?
Current exists. I'm gonna have to go back into the recesses.
Well, it's changed a little bit from what you've learned,
because we're evolving a little bit. Yeah. So I think the original is current exists to help people connect with their authentic selves to lead more fulfilling lives.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And that's very aspirational. So this is what we're about. This is why we're in business. If we focus on this deliverable in this story, everything else will take care of itself.
Yeah.
How have you seen that maybe change just a little bit from, or has it, with what you've seen in the last 6 months?
Well, there's a theme that keeps coming up for us that I believe it was represented, but may have been underrepresented when the work was still fiction. Now that it's nonfiction, it's becoming real. We're seeing the value of this community that we're building and this in-person interaction that people get when they come into an actual studio to meditate and not just use an app. And, apps are great and there's the consistency. There's a lot of reasons why they can work, but there's something really big missing about them. And the fact that they draw you into a device that is actually part of the challenge today of why people are feeling alone and disconnected. There's kind of an inherent Achilles heel there. We've found that our skill set is that we're really good at finding ways to, make a consistent experience happen. And that will become very important if we want to have more of these locations, we want to have large communities of people who are meditating. We have to be able to do that well. And so the concept of community, it happens to be something that we're very good at doing because of that consistent experience we can create. And it happens to be something we believe is one of the most powerful things that's going on in the four walls of the studio and beyond. So we love that concept, and I'd want to figure out a way to kind of weave that in a bit more to what our whole brand purpose is.
Yeah. And it's interesting when we first started talking about this, when we first jumped into the process of talking about meditation, which is singular in its own way. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to do my own thing. But then you all said, but we want to build community around it. And I think one of our first questions was, how do you build community around such a singular personal experience as meditation? And you guys have done a nice job of doing that. People come in, and again, think of the hero's journey. People step in out of their crazy, maniacal outside lives and they pull in, they get out of the car, they walk in, they immediately get this sort of calming sense of they're really in this transition, this threshold mode from going from the ordinary crazy world in this extraordinary studio. They take off their shoes and leave their phones and take a deep breath. They chat amongst themselves in kind of a little holding area, for lack of a better term. Decompression space. Yeah. And then they move into the inner sanctum, as I call it, the studio. And you can do a lot of different kinds and forms of meditation there. But you're in there for 20 to 40 minutes. And when you leave that room, you're coming back into your ordinary world, but you are coming back, as Joseph Campbell would say, with the boon, that you now have this peace of mind, this little bit more incremental strength over your thoughts and your ideas. And when you leave there, you do leave a little bit of a different person.
Yeah. And the neat thing is that it's a cumulative practice. I mean, with neuroplasticity and the science behind how this builds, you come in, you go through that little mini hero's journey each time, but that is building upon this larger story, this larger narrative. And with the science behind it to do so, that your brain is actually changing over time as you do this practice.
Yeah.
So it's really neat.
And I think I preempted my earlier question of how did this help you build consensus among your family? Because I think I asked you that, and then I jumped right on the brand purpose, and we got off on that. When it was all said and done, how did it help you all get on the same story page?
Yeah, I think, having that story and us going through it together. And I mean, everyone was at the table. We had meetings with 12 people around the table.
And then sometimes brought in your architectural firm and they sat in on some of this. And
Right. I think it was having the perspective, and, sometimes that can be a challenging thing. You don't want it to be by committee. So there was this natural order of an idea could come up, and we would bat that idea around. And then if it survived that process, we knew that it was viable, that it's something that should be included. And I think everyone felt comfortable that having gone through that, we got everything out on the table at the right time. Or forever hold your peace. And we baked it in.
Yeah. And then as it all came together, it was so much fun to see Fitch take it and run with it.
Yeah.
We had some initial designs, but once we had really landed on current and the look and feel of it through the story cycle, what they did with it was pretty amazing and fun to see it actually not just on websites and logos and T-shirts, but to see it in a physical structure and the user experience of the physical structure. I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's still evolving. Like as other creatives get their hands on this, there are other ways for us to express and position what we've created at the core here, this story. And so I'm excited about that as well, how that evolves.
And what I have learned in all this, because the story cycle was a science experiment for us back in the late 2009, 2010, coming out of Hollywood, and it was so powerful. What I've learned in working with you and other clients is that it takes the academia of going to market with a brand out of the picture, and you become much more human in how you approach it. You just think about what is the absolute human interaction that's going to take place? What is the user experience that is going to happen within our story? And how can we best understand and appreciate the journeys that our customers on so that we know from the architecture to the name, to the website, to the actual experience, how we can weave our story into their story.
Yeah. I think, now that there are billions of people who purchase with purpose, you have to have a story. There has to be some reason why they would choose you over another brand. And it definitely makes it more human. I mean, it's far less of a transactional way of saying, okay, here, marketing agency, literally come up with a story that we can use. That's just a fabricated story that we then go to market with. Instead, it's let's really think about what people would want. And if they're on this journey, what are the things that they're looking for? And then that's why going now through this evolution for us of being open is having that evolutionary effect of getting that feedback from our heroes and seeing what, is this the journey? Like, is this journey as impactful as it can be?
Yeah.
Or are there ways to make it even more impactful?
Well, and literally you guys are now, after about 7 different revolutions of the story cycle, you are living the road of trials right now.
Right.
Because you're just trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, how can we plug it in, like any startup would go through.
Right.
But you're also hearing those wonderful little words of, this is changing my life, or this is amazing, or this is magical. So you've got it there. It's just a matter of fine-tuning that story and really working with it.
Yeah, that's the magic. That's how we know we're onto something, is that we do have people that are coming and saying, this is unbelievable and has changed my life.
Yeah. Well, it's great having you here, Russ. I really appreciate it. If you guys are in Phoenix, or if you're coming to Phoenix, you got to swing by 44th Street, Indian School Road. It's on the southwest corner, right behind Doughbird. Right. Another Fox Concepts restaurant right behind Doughbird, and you're going to find Current Meditation. Check it out. It is so cool. It will get you rethinking maybe a lot of things in your life. And try the aerial meditation. Why don't you quickly explain what aerial is?
Yes, the aerial meditation, we have these hammocks, essentially, that are hanging from these.
They're like silk, right?
Yeah, they're called silks. They're just nice material that is stretchy. It'll hug you when you're meditating. So meditation can be done in a whole bunch of different positions, which is one of those misconceptions. You don't have to be on top of a mountain with your hands in a mudra and sitting with your legs crossed. So this is more comfortable, but there's also something called deep touch pressure, which is this parasympathetic nervous system activation. It's that feeling of being cocooned, and it calms you down immediately. So there's this extra benefit to
Is that the fetal position that we typically go in? But in this case, you're stretched out.
I think it's based probably on that.
Yeah.
There may be some sort
Mommy,
of connection to that.
get me out of the madness.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's cool.
Yeah.
You sit there, and then you can do the sound bell or the bells, and you do some different things as you're floating in there too.
We do, yeah. We actually take you through different techniques of meditation, and those different techniques bring you to a different meditative state. So that's not often very clear when you're reading all these studies and things about how meditation works, but different types of meditation techniques are going to do different things to your brain, but they all have this same effect of building this resiliency to stress and building your awareness and your focus.
Yeah.
And they might take you to different brainwave states. So we actually take you through a couple different brainwave states in the same meditative session.
Well, and I think the final thing that you can learn from this interview today is the authenticity that you have to have in your story marketing. It's just not enough to hire an agency and put together some creative campaign. The stories really start, they start within your organization and finding them, and then living into those stories and handing them off to your customers. So those stories become your customer stories. And then a funny thing happens in all that, Ross, and you guys are starting to experience this now, is your customer becomes the brand storyteller. You as the brand are simply the story maker. You make it happen so that they have these extraordinary experiences. And then you share those experiences with the world through your inbound marketing, outbound, events and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And we're excited for that.
So thanks for watching this edition. Any last parting words for them to help them get their mental fitness on this weekend if they can't roll into a current?
Be current.
Be current. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening. And like I said, as I started at the beginning of the show, I'm going to put this up one more time. If you would like to start finding the authentic stories in your organization and your leadership, join me a week from today. 4 seats left for Storytelling for Leaders right here at Park & Co. We're going to take you from 9 to 5 in an intimate, immersive workshop. And then for the next 6 months, every week, we'll be working with you to help you spot, capture, library, archive, and tell those amazing stories that are happening within your organization so that you can amplify your effect as a leader, help grow sales, shape the behaviors that you want to grow the culture that creates epic performance. So let me know. Link is up on the site here. I'd love to have you. And I guess until then, Ross, thank you so much for being on this edition of Park Howell Facebook Live, Business of Story, whatever we want to call it.
Great experience.
All right, all. Have a great weekend.